Well, maybe someday I'll get to preach on a Capuchin saint. I'm not sure how I keep getting skipped over, but I was looking forward to giving a nice historical theological musing on one of our saints this morning, but here I am again, reflecting on whatever I can share with you from my prayer life, so here we go again. The word is risk. It keeps coming back in my prayer life, keeps coming up in the Gospels. We heard it a couple of Saturdays ago. We heard it this Sunday, and we're going to hear it again today later on in today's Gospel. I'd be willing to bet that Paul talked about risk in your homily last Sunday. Am I right?
Yeah.
I know you like a book. But it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. And it's good because I'm not a gambling man. I never have been and probably never will be. I can't imagine working so hard for money and then putting it all up at the risk of losing everything just to gain a little bit more. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. Even the idea of a casino, just makes me cringe. I'm also afraid that I'll leave my wallet on a slot machine or something. Ask my brother. We'd be trading baseball cards, and I could never just quite part with some of my favorite players. He'd won one, and I'd say, no. Even when I would trade, I'd always want to trade for them back. I couldn't take that risk. And it's all the more ironic, I think, when you consider the vocation I'm currently living. St. Francis of Assisi, one of the biggest risk takers for the gospel of all time. If you read all the Gospels, especially Mark, you see the apostles following in the same line, following Jesus, a man they didn't know, a man they often misunderstood, even betrayed, but all risk takers. Peter, Andrew, James, John, Paul, St. Francis of Assisi, all gamblers, all risk takers, following in the footsteps of Jesus, who risked everything he was out of love for us. So today's gospel for the Mass is the parallel of last Sunday's. It's from Luke. So you have the king, he comes back to the three servants he's given his talents to. He wants to see what they've done with these talents. And every time I hear it, I identify with the guy who played it safe. That's who I identify with every time. Who kept his talents hidden away in a handkerchief. Not a hole this time, but Luke says a handkerchief. Knowing that there's a real possibility of losing it all if he dares put it out there and take a risk like the other guys did. And our theme for the past 2 years now in this house has been straight from our constitutions. Our life in poverty, chastity, and obedience, and fraternity is a daring adventure of love. Our life is not our own. It's meant to be shared. It's meant to be shared because it's how Christ loved us, and sharing his very life with us, even to the point of losing it. That's the daring part, and it's what makes everything so risky. Sometimes I wish we could just call it Capuchin Franciscans, an adventure of love. Wouldn't that be nice? Sounds much more benign, safe. Maybe if it's not too daring, I can avoid the risk of failure and disappointment, and just preserve myself intact. Not to stretch myself too thin. It's amazing how places like Las Vegas and Atlantic City stay in business when our culture is so bent on preservation. Brother Obioma and I were sharing some stories on our way up to York for Fan the Fire. We were talking about our childhoods, two very different childhoods, growing up in small town Ohio and in a village in Nigeria. We didn't have electricity or refrigeration in my village, Obiama said. When we had too much food that couldn't be eaten, we would invite family and friends over to share it with them. Just thinking back on my Thanksgivings, let's see. We'd stuff our faces with food, put it in the fridge, and do the same thing again the next day. Obiama, if that's not Eucharist, I don't know what is. There's no such thing as leftovers when you embrace the gospel life. And brothers, I'm slowly but surely learning, the call of our baptism is not self-preservation. The call of our vocation as Capuchin friars is not to play it safe. Our lives, our very selves, with every gift and talent and quirk and misgiving, they're meant to be shared. When we share ourselves, when we give ourselves away, everything we have, everything we are, even to the point of going beyond ourselves, that's when we share most authentically the gospel. This is going to mean taking risks. It's going to mean going out of our comfort zones. It's going to mean taking a difficult class with a difficult teacher that we've been avoiding for the past 2 years. It's going to mean taking on new ministries that we don't think we have the gifts and talents for. It's going to mean taking on friendships that might challenge and stretch us a bit. This was a very hard lesson for me, I know, my first few years at Capuchin College. I played my cards close to my chest. I didn't want to risk anything. And it was the brothers, most of whom are still sitting with us right here, who taught me how to get out of myself and they continue to do so. And I'm still working on it. But they're teaching me that the gospel isn't meant to be put on ice. It's meant to be heated up and shared with everyone we meet. And that means acknowledging that each one of us has something to share, whether we know it or not. Ben Colucci, when we were in Kansas, great friar, great homilist, said that we've only just begun to discover the gifts and talents that God wants to share with the world. I think he's right. There's a great temptation, brothers, to hold ourselves back, especially when we're tired and frustrated, when we're feeling inadequate, unprepared, inept, discouraged. Especially when we see others flourishing in their obvious gifts and collecting on their risk. Sometimes it doesn't seem like much of a risk at all. If it's that easy, where is the risk? I have nothing to contribute, I'll just stand aside. What I want to say is, don't let your habit become the handkerchief where you hide your talents. Let your Capuchin vocation be a sign of Christ's victory and a sign that you've got something to share with the world. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. There is no more gambling. The point is to lose everything, because he has already won us forever.